So I wanted us to consider 3 simple steps. You might think of them as a believer's survival guide from the first century. First, how do you prime the pump? And for what kind of wisdom? How can we learn to tame our tongues, to speak in ways that edify instead of spark dissension and destruction? As James implies, it begins with considering how we think before we speak. It's especially an important skill in a world of Twitter, and where nasty rhetoric seems to be the norm. As Christians, we need to uphold a different way of speaking, a way that is controlled and that emerges from the deep well of God's wisdom. In other words, we need to try to engage the brain and the spirit before we engage the tongue, or before we type a tweet or a thought. A recent book by a university professor at Baylor University in Texas, his name is Alan Jacobs, offers, I think, some great advice on how to repair the connection between the brain and the tongue. When someone posts an outrageous tweet, we're prone to wonder, what were they thinking? Well, chances are they weren't thinking. Jacob suggests in his book, and I'll give you the title of his book here. The title of the book is How to Think, a survival guide for a world at odds. So you might guess where I got my sermon title. In this book, Jacob seems to build on the advice that James gives us in this passage. He offers a thinking person's checklist. And in the book, there are 12 ideas. I won't give you all 12 this morning, but I'm going to boil it down to 3 categories that he outlines. And so the first one is pretty simple. Be slow. Now that's not hard for me. I don't know, some of you might be faster than me, and so if you happen to be fast, this is good advice for you. I'm real slow anyway, so it doesn't, as an introvert, we usually think long and hard before we open our mouths. But typically, I learned this from the Kurtz girls. Just shut up and listen. You know, don't say just whatever comes to your mind, because that usually ends up with something bad happening at dinner. But be slow. That's good advice. In a world of instant messaging, where Twitter and sound bites tend to make people quick to react, where we have fight and flight mechanisms in place, being slow is really good advice. Jacob suggests that when we're tempted to respond quickly, we should instead give it at least 5 minutes. I think maybe we should give it a night. We should sleep on it, maybe. He says, go take a walk, make dinner, do some deep breathing. Do whatever it takes to get your body involved, because if your body gets involved, your brain will start working better. That's good advice. It's hard to do if you're fast. But if you remember that the instruction is to be slow, that's a really good way to help yourself. Okay? Maybe consider not responding at all. Good and wise thinkers focus on thinking and responding about the right things, not about everything. Okay? As James says earlier in his letter, let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, for your anger does not produce God's righteousness. Okay? So that's the first thing. Secondly, be teachable. Jacob suggests in his book that one of the reasons we're so quick to respond to things in a Twitter culture is that others are watching us. We want to impress our like-minded friends. He calls this our inner ring, our inner circle of friends. And we get good vibes from those folks. They always like the things that we say. So we want those good vibes, right? So the reason that we want that is because it means that we're getting the opposing group, we're sticking it to the opposing group, right? He calls that the repugnant cultural other. But he says when we're focused so much on our inner ring, then it's at that point that our speech can become caustic and become difficult, maybe even disastrous. The truth is, there isn't anyone that we can't learn from. Recently, I went to Iowa and spent a week with my two brothers. We're all three very different. We grew up kind of in different generations where we have 13 years between us, and so we all have very different experiences in life, very different inner rings of friends. My ring of friends tends to be very progressive. My oldest brother, his inner ring of friends tend to be very, very conservative. My other brother is sort of a libertarian. He has a whole different, we don't understand him very well. But we're all teachable. And we spend a lot of time when we're together trying to understand each other. And so that's a good thing. The truth is, if you take time to learn from those that you disagree with, it teaches you things that you need to know. The key is found in choosing good conversation partners. There are plenty of people on social media, for instance, who are just trying to aggravate you. I mean, maybe you have a person that's like that in your home. They just try to aggravate you. But if you let them, then that wouldn't be a good thing, right? My wife is going to hate me to tell you this morning, but she had kind of a bad spell this morning, and I just didn't let her get me. If I had responded the way I might have responded, why, we might not have made it to church this morning. But she thought differently of herself and apologized before we got out the door, and so that was pretty nice. You can talk to her about that and see what she thinks about it. But here's what the old adage says: don't wrestle with pigs, you end up getting dirty, and only the pig enjoys it. Okay? So that's an important one for us to remember. Avoid those who fire off ideas like missiles. Instead, seek out the best and fair-minded people among you, people even with whom you disagree. And always assume the best of people. You may believe that they're wrong, but that doesn't mean you get to categorize them as evil. Okay? After all, remember that you're often wrong too. Building characters of other people and their ideas is a poor use of our intellectual capital. Value learning over debating. Listen and learn. And then maybe you can begin to understand. So the second thing is be teachable. It's really important. The third thing in our survival kit is to be honest. When you do speak, state what you think and believe with conviction, but draw always from the well of God's wisdom and God's love. As James says, the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy, and full of good fruits. without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. When we speak out of that type of base of wisdom, then he says, a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who make peace. This is helpful wisdom. It's good advice in an age where thinking and speaking are often in short supply. Words matter. Let us think and speak clearly, whether it's with our mouths or our keyboards. As believers in a culture where social media often pits people against each other, we should always strive to find ways to survive. James encourages us to be slow, to be teachable, and to be honest. In closing, I read something this week by a man named Henry James, and I thought to myself, I think maybe James the Apostle would agree with these ideas too. He says there are three things important in life. The first is to be kind. The second is to be kind. The third is to be kind. Let it be.